We're snorting cap rates and shooting up cash flow here at Deal Junkies. Welcome back to Deal Junkies. We're back in the studio. Trevor and Dane look a little peaked this morning.
They got their Velo mix.
What's Velo mix?
I don't know. This is some electrolyte water Jan told me to drink.
So you guys were out late last night?
No, I was in bed early.
We met someone at the taco spot.
Oh,
his name's not Israel.
Sebastian,
you're awesome. I apologize for calling you Israel at the end.
We were eating tacos for dinner, and he came by. He said, "What's up, Deal Junkies?" And he was doing some deals, and he sat down with us, and we talked about doing deals.
He tried to like say, "Hey, what's up, Deal Junkies?" as he's walking out the door.
Oh.
Trevor reeled him in though.
He recognized you guys?
Yeah.
He comes to the meetup too. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah, you'd like him.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like people doing deals.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So today, what are we going to talk about? Trevor and Dane aren't going to talk. They're going to take a nap because they stayed out late eating tacos with Sebastian and doing other things we won't talk about. And Mike and I want to get into some old man stuff. I think you guys talked about economics in our last episode, but I really want to get into this Trump, Elon Musk, Doge, tariffs. Like, there's 500 new headlines every day. Seems like for the first few weeks, everyone was real excited, and now suddenly everybody is like going, uh-oh, what's going to happen? We don't know how this is going to affect us at all. Some of it sounds really cool. Some of it sounds scary. Some people are really mad about it. So let's dive in.
Wait.
What?
Can you fill me in on the high level? I haven't seen any of this.
You've been partying too much.
No,
Trevor
I just haven't
never knows anything about the news, which is acceptable. He's not on his phone much.
I got that brick, and now I don't go on the internet ever.
The brick
for
app.
anything.
Yeah.
That's not helping you.
I
You
don't
need
know.
to know what's going on in the world.
I don't know.
Well, you know who our president is right now?
Joe Biden.
He bricked it like November 4th.
I haven't used my phone in 6 months.
Well, we have a new president. He's got a lot of ideas, and I think he passed more executive orders in the first day than like the average president has done in the first year or something like that.
Okay.
And so they're reversing a lot of Biden policies. They're firing a lot of people. They're laying a lot of people off. I think the concept is to shrink the federal government, which as a libertarian, I got to admit, like most of the stuff they're doing is like I thought would never come true in my lifetime. So it's pretty fun to watch it. I don't know how much of it is actually going to happen, but then you see it happening and you start to wonder if they actually balance the budget, which Elon says he can do in 1 year. If he can save $4 billion a day of taxpayer dollars, then he can balance the budget by next year. And I don't know what our deficit is
What
today.
does that mean to balance the budget? Meaning we're paying down debt again?
Instead of
rather
adding
than
$3 trillion
debts?
of debt to they're neutral.
Okay.
They've borrowed so much. So we've been in deficit spending. So we're spending more than our revenues. So we have to borrow in order to pay the bills. And those interest rates are going up. So now our interest payments just on that debt is actually higher than our defense spending. So we're spending more money on interest right now than we are on defense spending, which I have other questions about.
For reference, Trevor, we spend a lot of money on defense spending. We're like what's our defense budget? Like $800 billion?
It's like your mortgage. It's like your mortgage payment at a 65% LTV.
The defense spending?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big mortgage
It eats
payment.
up a lot of your cash flow.
It's like your big of your biggest
It's the
expenses is what you're saying.
It doesn't allow for much of a HELOC on top of it.
Yeah.
So what is happening right now? Like, I had lunch with Paul Curley yesterday, and he's worried. And I'm like, why are you worried? Like, if they actually do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to stop wasteful spending, and they balance the budget, and they take money away from bureaucrats who are wasting it on programs, and they're talking about there's a lot of fraud and other things that are happening with this money. If they stop that, and we're not just bleeding money out one side. We've talked about this in our money creation episode when we said, where's the money? What was it called? The movie we
Finding
watched?
the Money.
Finding the Money.
Yeah.
There's an episode you can go back and listen to that. We need to have kind of a continuation of that, I think, today to talk about, well, what actually happens because inflation is driven up by spending, but they try to pull money back off the street so that the consumers aren't competing with the government spending, which drives up inflation. So if we stop the government from wasteful spending, but we put more money in the consumer's pocket, how does that affect us? It's the same money slushing around in the system. We're not necessarily creating new money, which is what our thesis is behind owning assets long term, is the money goes down in value, and so your assets, therefore...
That's Paul's concern, is that we're not creating more money because of lack of spending.
Yeah, his whole business model is inflation. If they solve the inflation equation, then he's out of business.
I have so many thoughts on this, and I love how you set that up by talking about finding the money, because that's where my brain wanted to go to. But his business model up until modern times was inflation, until that we went over the cliff, and now his business model is based off lower interest rates to create the inflationary pressure on his real estate.
So when you lower, so let's unpack that.
So go.
If you lower the interest rate, cap rates go down, your value goes up. That's not. Is that inflationary? It's one form of inflation because the cost of debt goes down, so the value of the building is higher.
So we want to define deflation as losing purchasing power, but the reality in the marketplace of owning real estate and real life operations is you have more equity to use, you have more money to use, and you can trade that for something of comparable value or more value. And so he can't create more value in his real estate right now because interest rates are so high, and so he's stuck. Or that creates less transactions.
Sure.
And so really he needs lower interest rates to create that inflationary effect. Like, he wants to feel an inflationary effect, and lower interest rates will do that for two purposes. One, immediately overnight his real estate's more leverageable, it's more valuable, it creates more income. But that happens for every single building. And so then the market goes up as a tide.
So one of the things I'm seeing on Main Street is we talk about, when you look at the big national numbers, that GDP is doing well. As a nation, we're doing well. Unemployment, we're pretty close to full employment. Like, all the numbers sort of line up to where everybody should feel pretty okay about where we're at in the economy. But then on Main Street, you just start to see businesses closing and people they don't have the money that they had a few years ago. Like, people are struggling. And so, to me, if you can put more money in their pocket, that obviously is the lifeblood. That's the driving force of the United States. I think 60+% of our GDP is consumer spending. Mm-hmm. So if you put more money on Main Street, in my mind, just like what happened in COVID, you've got more people fighting over that unit to rent, more people fighting over that house to buy, and we can't make the houses and the apartments fast enough for all those people that are suddenly going to have money in their pocket. If that is the outcome that actually happens, is Main Street now has more money as an effect of Doge and getting rid of all the governance. So they're already talking about giving everybody $5,000 or giving everybody dividends on the savings. Like, you start to pump money into Main Street. To me, that will be an inflationary effect because there won't be enough product for them to buy. There will be now again too many dollars chasing too few goods and services. And like the money creation, if you don't create, this is where I get lost with it. If you don't create any more money, well, first off, we have household formation, we have job formation, we have people being born into our country and growing up and graduating college, and constantly we're in this expansion phase. There has to be some money creation.
You're constantly in this expansion phase until you can't expand anymore. And so that's where going back to finding the money is such a great point. So, like, the premise of people who really don't like MMT, modern monetary theory, is they believe modern monetary theory people believe you can just print and you're fine. You'll never go bankrupt. You can never go bankrupt because you can always print. And what our times are showing us is you can only do that to a point where then the other government stop buying your debt. Your central bank has to stop buying your debt because the costs are too high, inflation's too high. Private industry stop buying your debt. And so now your interest rate gets so darn high, you have to stop spending or it's going to get hyper worse. Okay. And so if you're a government, and this is where Doge comes into play, my belief, like the thought process I've had these past 2 weeks, is if your government cannot go bankrupt, like bankruptcy for private citizens, that's your reset button. That's your mechanism, right? The government doesn't have that. Their only mechanism is an uproll from consumers. is consumers voting with their pocketbook to say this is no more. We are no longer going to take this. And that's what happened with Trump, and that's why he got elected. And now the only way to change government is to run it more like a business. And so we got to the brink of bankruptcy, essentially. And so then our creditors, which is the taxpayers, essentially said, here's how we're going to redo this. We're bringing in new leadership, right? Trustees coming in to look at all your assets, to look at your balance sheet, to look at your P&L and say, you have wasted balance sheet here. You have how many millions of square feet in Washington, D.C.? How productive are those buildings based on the cost of them, based on the people that are in them? So they're just re-looking at all of their assets, which is your employees, which is your cash, which is your debt, which is your reserves. So they're looking at it from a business standpoint. And the problem is when we look at it from a business standpoint is some people just don't want their lives run like businesses. And then you add on the fact that some people just don't like the other side of the aisle, and it creates this turmoil and fast. But from an economic theory standpoint, this all makes sense. And I'm sure I'm going to offend a lot of people that just really don't want to hear this. But the reason the Fed has a dual mandate is because it offsets each other, right? We want maximum employment, but we also want
low inflation. And maximum employment is inflationary.
Exactly. So let's go now to what the government's doing and how that affects those two mechanisms, right? So if you do mass government layoffs, you're doing what the Fed has been trying to do with higher interest rates. It's just a faster tool. It's a faster mechanism. So now you add labor to the economy, or labor supply to the labor market. You lower wages, you lower purchasing power. It has a deflationary effect. You also lower government spending. So you have this period of time that's not going to lower any money into the economy because there's unemployment, there's a bridge, but it just shifts it, like you said, it's going to shift it into the private economy at a lower cost. And so now think of it from the Fed standpoint. Okay, well now unemployment rate's going to go up. We're triggering that side of the equation. So then what does the Fed have to do to offset higher unemployment?
They got to lower rates.
And if the government's lowering their spending, the two most powerful slides that I've been using in my presentations is you can show the Fed trying to reduce their balance sheet since 2022. You combine that with the money supply graph. And early on from 2022 to 2023, the Fed was reducing their balance sheet and the money supply was coming out of the economy. But in 2024, that shift. The Fed continued to reduce their balance sheet, but the government increased their spending. And so money supply increased even though the Fed was pulling money out. And so if you change it on the government end, and now the government's not adding to the economy and the Fed's not adding to the economy, now the Fed can lower interest rates. And so if we can lower interest rates at the Fed level, that sets the yield curve, that lowers interest rates for consumers.
So I think one of the things that creates uncertainty is everybody says, okay, we know who our president's going to be, and we all breathe a sigh of relief. It's like, even if you don't like him, at least we know where we're headed, right? Then the next thing that happens is we didn't really understand that Elon was going to play as big of a role as he's playing. People are calling him President Musk. Like, this guy's got big ideas, and he's doing big things. And so many of the headlines, at least half of them, are more about Elon than even what Trump is talking about. And one of the things he talks about is if they can balance the budget, which he believes they can do, which is amazing, in the next, something they haven't been able to do in 40 or 50 years. They do that in a year. And then the government isn't going to have to borrow money anymore. And when the government doesn't have to borrow money anymore, the cost of money is going to go down.
Yeah, and they're being smart. They're really concerned about the 10-year yield. They're not issuing debt at the 10-year. They're concerned about long-term rates because they understand how long-term rates set the rates that we use in the marketplace. And so they're issuing short-term debt because they look at this as a short-term flip, right? We're going to redo this business. We're going to get bridge debt at a higher rate than we want for the short term, but that's better than getting trapped into long-term debt. We're going to flip this around in the first couple of years. Now we can refinance when rates are lower. That again will have another effect to help the budget deficit issue. So from an economic machine standpoint, it makes sense. What we don't know is, tariffs aren't part of that conversation.
Makes sense to who? Makes sense to the country? Makes sense to real estate investors?
Economic theory to reduce right now we can't take anymore.
Yeah, we were at a tipping point.
Yeah, so we don't have transaction volume. So now you release the pressure, you allow people to transact again, right? So then we get flowing, the economy gets growing, and hopefully it gets growing at a small incremental pace instead of too fast to get us in the same position.
So tell me the downside risk here of Elon balancing the budget, getting rid of inflation. Paul, even though Paul loves Trump, this really scares him, the fact that we may get inflation fully under control. Now you got to change your business model around. So, what are the downside risks to real estate investors with all of the things that are happening between tariffs, potentially eliminating income tax, going to the external revenue service instead of the internal revenue service? There are so many different ideas being thrown around. I think it's pretty hard to imagine what this future might look like.
Yeah, and that is my takeaway from right now is nobody knows what, and so then that creates this. We've had a release of the presidential election butt pucker, but then we kind of have this next new pucker.
There's a new pucker.
Yeah, and it's because you don't know what all is going to stick. And the tariffs are a really good example of those are more they're more of a geopolitical negotiation tool than economic tool. Yeah. But all these executive orders, you don't know what will stick. And part of it is actual cuts, part of it is spending, right? And so actual firings, they will be fast into the marketplace. That will be fast. Cutting of spending reverberates throughout. It's like a longer tailwind of how that's going to act. So when they say they can cut the budget over the year, no, that's just like saying, hey, we have this pro forma, and a year from now, this is going to happen. Well, the reality is it's not going to play out.
Yeah, to me, in the first 30 days, they've cut $110 billion or something. I mean, they're on track for about $4 billion a day. I just don't see that the pace of that's going to continue.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a bunch up front for a month or two, and then it's going to start to taper off.
It's not exponential growth; it's the opposite of that. Yeah. I agree with that.
I'm very. I'm optimistic about what's going on, but I'm also taking it with a grain of salt because I just don't think that. Yeah. I don't think they will actually balance the budget. Not in a year.
I would say this: they would put their money where their mouth was if they actually believed it. But we're increasing the debt ceiling for a reason. Is because we're preparing to not have a balanced budget.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to increase it if you're going to be balanced.
Yeah. And honestly, even if you felt like you could fix it, I think you still, and this is really kind of what Trump's statement was, well, I still want to have a safety net, right? If you've got a construction draw if your budget's 400, you'd rather have a construction draw for 500.
Well, I think his comment was we shouldn't even have a debt ceiling. That was one thing that was thrown out.
Yeah, if you actually have control of
the budget.
If you have political will.
Yeah. So do you think, you talk a lot about political will, do you think, you were talking about how we had no political will, do you feel like now we do have political will?
Absolutely.
That's what this is.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it's not political will because the politicians have political will. It's because the voters said, this is the route we want to go, and we are now going to elect the individuals who don't care what it's going to take to go down this road. And so I wouldn't say as a country we have political will because we have a lot of political turmoil. We have Civil War level chaos and confrontation without the guns and the actual fighting to an extent.
One side has guns.
Yeah, well, it's not playing out in the streets outside of COVID and Antifa and Portland and Proud Boys. It hasn't really played out in the streets, but the rhetoric is there. I think this is as close to political will as we're going to get. The problem is we haven't seen how the checks and balances, right? We went through all the chips to one table, and the table's teetering, and we don't know how it's going to play out. We don't know if Republicans are at any point going to change their tone. They're not going to give their support. Even the people he's trying to appoint are barely passing, so it's not a full support to go this direction, which is good because you do need balancing in the government. And I think the biggest fear, my dad is very anti-Trump. And so when you read the statements that he says, it is very fearful that we're losing the balance of the government, the three-legged table.
Getting a dictator, somebody who has too much power.
Correct. And that is a valid fear because it's shock and awe right now, right? So with shock and awe, You get frayed. You don't think, you think emotionally, you don't necessarily think logically. And I look at it as we can't think logically right now because we don't really know. We don't have enough pieces and data points to point logically to.
Yeah, I think of like our economy, we're a capitalistic society. Capitalism, I think, is not perfect, but it's the best thing we've come up with so far. There are definite pros and cons, to the free market, and people, they look at billionaires, and I see people make comments of, oh, they're only billionaires because they're greedy. And it's like, no, they're billionaires because they created an enterprise that helped a lot of people a lot. That's how they made a lot of money. Like, dude, these guys are smart. They know what they're doing, and it is not just greed. I believe that. I believe wholeheartedly that's the wrong thought process around people that have money. However, I also believe that our system is capitalism has promoted things like, we've got the cancer industry. Mm-hmm. And you wonder, cancer industry is so profitable. If we were to cure cancer, like it would hit the front page of the paper today, and we would all be like, yay, no more cancer. And then the next minute, our markets would crash because all of the businesses, the medical industry, big pharma, and all these things would collapse because they need this bad thing to be happening so that they can make money. Same thing with the military industrial complex. We need war to continue because we sell weapons. It's like you talk about one of the things Trump's talking about. He wants to take control of the Gaza Strip. Well, it's kind of a funny talking point, but when you think about it, how brilliant, all this is. I think that we have an advantage of being real estate guys because we see things through the lens of real estate, whereas the average citizen may just go like, what in the hell is he talking about? He's going like, we've got two places that are been fighting over this strip of land for 2,000 years, and they're willing to die over it. I got an idea. Let's go take it over, and we'll rent it back to them. We'll rent it to the highest bidder. And then when they screw up, we'll go tell them, that's all it is a real estate play in my mind. I don't know if that's true or not.
That's exactly what it is. It's a business real estate mindset overlaying a really complicated thousands of year old cultural, spiritual, no.
So the sad truth though behind what's happening in the Gaza Strip is these people are fighting on either side with guns that we sold them, right? I mean, we're gun dealers, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is part of our economy. So if you have lasting peace, there's a whole part of our economy that gets a black hole. There is no more war.
Sure, and I'll just put it to this. I've probably done a little, well, maybe not, but I don't think you gentrify your way out of a religious fight.
Yeah.
And I don't think, so even if you invest billions and trillions of dollars and you rebuild this, does that mean they're going to occupy the space in the way that they agree to occupy
But these are the kind of things that are making people feel a little uneasy, right? It's like, Canada's going to be our 51st
So
here's
the problem.
We're going to buy Greenland.
Exactly. Bring this down to running a small business. If your employees are going down this direction, think my employees, right? Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to go do that. We're going to do this. We're going to go do that. What the fuck is my leadership doing? Are we America first, or are we going to go rebuild Gaza? Are we America first, or are we freaking North Canada? It's like, what are we doing? What is your mandate?
We're America first, and we're growing. Yeah. We're expanding. We're in an expansion phase.
So it's the ADHD mindset of a big vision. I mean, is there a bigger visionary than Donald Trump?
No. Maybe Elon.
There you go. So both of them.
He just wants to live on Mars. He's doing all this so he can go to Mars. Imagine that being your why. Like, I'm the richest man in the world, but I'm going to work for free because I want to go to Mars. Okay.
I heard a really interesting
I can't think
theory
that big.
on that, which is the people with the most money want to get to Mars because they have no way to protect themselves if the shit goes south. From a security standpoint. Like, if the value of your money's gone, and now we're back to just...
So you got to go buy a planet real quick. Yeah. So you got your own planet.
So you can run away. Yeah, it's an interesting theory. But you were talking about the tides of markets, and this is really like when you went to healthcare. This is really interesting. One of the guys in GoBundance the other day posted this comment about the S&P 500 and 401ks, and he's talking about the PE ratios are 9-to-1 or all these metrics in the stock market. And he's like, well, but this is just fed by mindless people auto withdrawing part of their income, supported by their employers, just feeling. Every month, more money getting dumped into these 7 companies over and over and over again. And you have this mindless tide of really what's keeping the entire stock market floating up. that happens in every freaking industry we have. We have a huge tide of commercial real estate debt. We have a huge tide of mortgage-backed securities. We have a huge tide of funding for cancer. We have a huge tide of funding for new energy, right? Like, we just have these huge buckets of money.
What do you think's pushing that?
Printing money.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the inflationary tide. And so when we talk about, well, if we cure cancer, the money would just shift to a different arena. And it's just like AI, and it's just like technology is they're going to erase some jobs, but that can create productivity in other areas. So it's going to create other types of jobs.
But that's the uncertainty I'm talking about, is you might go do something that's really good for Americans, and it might have an unintended consequence.
That's the argument we got in last episode.
That you're like a Paul Curley, and it's like, my hero is Trump, and Trump just stepped in and just wiped out my whole business model because I buy for inflation.
But he just doesn't understand it through that lens. If he can see, like our conversation, if he can track what we just said, which is the tract of the economic machine, at the end, he wins in that economic machine.
Well, because you're providing a value to an end customer that needs housing.
If the economic theory, as I just laid it out, comes to play, interest rates are lower.
Rents start to go up.
Rents go up. Yep. Construction like that. We breathe again.
It spurs the economy. It spurs housing.
He hasn't felt inflation for the past 2-3 years.
Well, he's felt it, but on the wrong end. We haven't felt it on the value side. We felt it on the expense side.
Why would interest rates be lower?
Because we now because we have a higher unemployment rate, because we've triggered the other side of the dual mandate.
You eliminate inflation, and the government no longer needs to borrow money. And so when you look at supply and demand from the borrowing standpoint, if the government doesn't need to borrow that money, then somehow, I don't know. I mean, we could talk about that, but the theory is the government borrows less money and the cost of debt will go down. So it'll drive the cost of buying a bond to a higher price, which drives the yield down, which means we can all borrow money. So I guess it's supply and demand. The government is right now creating a ton of demand for that debt, which is driving the price of a bond down, which is making the yield go up, which is driving our interest rates up. If the government is no more competing for that money, now the cost of that money goes down, and we all benefit from being able to borrow at lower rates. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Part of the Trump trade staying around the elevated bond rates, bond yields, was because we've record level supply of debt. New debt to the auctions in Q4. So if the government stops supplying debt to the auctions, you just trickled off the supply side. So now it's just the natural supply and demand taking place. And if the Fed is continuing to pare their balance sheet at that time, now we're truly sucking money out of the economy. And then you just get to a point where, and if you look at
But if you're sucking money out of the economy, why would that decrease interest rates?
Because now you can offset that with increased interest rates. You can offset that by lowering interest rates to increase spending.
That follows.
Yeah. I really said that wrong to begin with.
It really confused me, actually.
Yeah. So now you're like, now we can spur spending, because right now we're trying to stop spending. So now you get to a point like, oh, great, we got that in control. Now we can let it happen again. So we're holding our breath, and we can't take in any more air. So we got to let some air out so we can bring it back in.
So all these billions of dollars, if they saved $110 billion, if that's really the number, all these crazy things we're spending money on, you read the list and it drives you nuts what they're spending money on.
Well, $4 billion a day is $2 trillion a year. We took on $3 trillion last year. It's not done.
It's not done. But my question is like, that money, even if it was being spent on things we don't necessarily like or agree with, it was still being pumped into the economy. Somebody was making money. So I guess the concept is, and this is really an interesting thought, because for the last 4 years, you had the narrative that these billionaires, like, it was sort of like the haves and the have-nots, and we've entered into a society where, like, the poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer, there is no middle class. And the thought process was, this is all because our resources are just going to a very small number of people. And so the word billionaire almost just became like a bad word. You know, you get the Elons, you get the Bezos, you get Zuckerberg,
it's
whatever.
Allocation conversation. They don't like allocation.
And they became villains for what they had done. And then when you look at really, like, it's like, okay, this guy is a billionaire, but they're blowing hundreds of billions of dollars. It's the bureaucrats that where the money is trickling to.
But
and
you
I think
can't point to any single one. That's the thing.
Well, as they uncover more and more and more, I think that what's going to happen, well, first off, if anybody's like me, I think people are going to be pissed off. And then I think people are going to go like, I don't really want to pay taxes because they're not spending it on what they should be spending it on. So now you're going to have more people that are not wanting to pay taxes. You're going to have more people that are up in arms over the things that are going on. And the people right now that are complaining about what Trump and Elon are doing, I don't really understand their position, where they're coming from, that these guys are going to go in and it's unconstitutional. These guys are dictators. They're going in and firing all these hardworking civil servants or whatever. I kind of get the idea, but then when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, but if they're really truly wasting our money, it should be transparent. And when they're showing you in real time what the government is wasting our money on and how there's literally trillions of dollars missing and unaccounted for, like the average American that's just using logical thinking, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but I believe that the government the people should be in control of our government, and it should be a small, controlled government, and we should limit the amount of spending that we have. I mean, all the things they talk about doing, and the people they're getting on board with Rand Paul and Ron Paul, and like the team that they're building it's amazing. Like the Libertarian Party has come out and congratulated Trump, and he's thanked them for their vote to get to where he is, because honestly, if we got a libertarian president, I don't think they could do what Trump is doing right now. Like what we're seeing is literally it's like a pipe dream. It's what libertarians have always wanted for decades. And then you get to this and it's like, holy shit, we're actually going to get it. And then you start to wonder, like, but what does that mean? Right. Is it really good? Like, I hope it's good. I think it'll be good for our country.
And that's a really good way to kind of put a bow on this. The All In podcast, there's one of the guys, the billionaires, hates Trump, absolutely hates Trump, and they get in their argument. It's funny, right? Like you've got David Sachs loves Trump, then you have the other guy who hates him. The guy who hates him had a really great statement at the end of one of their last episodes was, I did not support Trump, I did not like Trump, I am in full support of Trump, and I hope he succeeds. And I hope people understand that is important for all of us for this to succeed, because economically that is really what drives our lives. Every decision we make has some type of economic lens to it, and if we are unhealthy from a government economic standpoint, we have this unhealthy energy over every single one of our individual cells, whether we feel it or like believe it or not, we feel it. And so we need that to be cured for us to be cured in other ways.
So I think that the outcome long term is that you have less poverty. We bring back a middle class, which we've sort of been losing. So we're going to bring this middle class that's been sinking into poverty. We're going to bring them back in, and we're going to actually have a middle class, which is actually what's going to drive the biggest economy and fuel, the biggest empire in the history of the world. What happens to rich people? What happens to people who own real estate? I think that's what we're talking about right now. Is are we bringing more people out of that, or is it like what is it like? All boats rise.
Is it a rising tide for everybody?
The rising tide.
I think productivity has a huge portion. Like you're always going to have poverty. You're always going to have, because of the way that capitalism stores resources, you're always going to be threat to the middle class. I don't see how you get rid of threat to the middle class without reallocating resources to an extent. I haven't even thought about this. It's just coming out of my brain.
This is something that I've thought about is think of like Saudi Arabia. Like what does Saudi Arabia have besides oil? Like they're just it's just sand. It's just like a place with sand and a lot of oil. Am I wrong? I haven't been there.
No, I don't think so. It's just a wild sentence.
I mean, maybe there's something else.
What are they good for?
I mean,
except oil.
The oil created a sovereign trust. that creates an income stream.
And did you see that we now have an American sovereign trust?
They're starting to. Is it being created? Or are they talking about
it? Got created.
Jesus.
Yeah. So
and
this whole drill drill thing. So then I'm thinking within our border standpoint. Now let's expand our minds to the global. Mm-hmm. And you look at a place like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and they've got 400-story skyscrapers or whatever. They're flying around. They're cop cars or Lamborghinis, right? And you go like, how in the hell does that happen? Well, it happens because they produce oil and they sell it to the rest of the world, and everybody
they mobilize their resources in a significantly more efficient way because they have a very more narrowed mindset, right? Like America is very scattered in what our beliefs are. And I think when you go this is an assumption.
Well, they don't let them believe anything different.
Right. So you have a more inline, now it's much easier to be efficient with how you stack resources.
But this, I think, is Trump's dream. I think he plans on, let's not take the money back off the street. Let's take the money from other countries. Let's sell oil to other countries. Yeah. We have more oil than any other country. When Trevor and Dane and I went to Europe last year, we were in Sweden and Norway, and I mean, these countries are rich because they're like, yeah, Norway, 90% of the cars are electric cars, and they're like, yeah, we like to have a clean environment. And I was like, yeah, but where do you get all your money? And they're like, well, we sell oil to other countries.
Well, they also have Norway has the two largest sovereign trust funds around.
But it's from oil.
Yeah,
and they're like,
it's an income stream.
They're like, it's not lost on us that we're selling oil to the rest of the world so we can all drive electric cars.
But the other part of it is they don't have nearly as dense level of population.
That's true.
Yeah,
and it's a different type of government.
Yeah,
it's socialist.
Yeah, and we're the ultimate consumers. So everything is different here.
Oh, we're different, guaranteed. Yeah. I actually, to be honest with you, coming back from that trip, I was more proud to be an American than ever. I loved being over there. I love the people over there, but like they're literally competing with each other to try to be exactly the same. They are not American. Like we were just like, what? Like I mean, it's cool to watch it, but we were like, yeah, unfortunately for us, it wouldn't work. It's just not in our DNA.
Yeah,
like it's cool, but I mean, so I just wonder, if we enter into this golden era that Trump talks about, and we start producing more of our resources and selling them to other countries. And then the tariff thing, I understand tariffs are inflationary. Tariffs are not always the best idea, I don't think, but it has worked before in the past in certain circumstances. But to your point in the beginning of this episode, you talked about how he's negotiating. And that I think one of the reasons I'm personally not as scared as some of the moves he's making is I'm in real estate deals all day long, and I understand negotiating. And Putin already said it. Trump is the master negotiator. Yep. When he says we're going to implement tariffs, he got what he wanted within 24 hours.
Do what he says he's going to do.
He does it, but he did it to Mexico and Canada, and within 24 hours they said, "Okay, fine, we'll give you what you want." Right?
And the reason they say he's a master negotiator is because he just doesn't back down. He has the mentality that this is a pie. It's not getting bigger. I'm taking as much of it as I can, and I'm not going to back down from that stance.
For America. And so tariffs are that thing. And so I asked this question to myself yesterday is, if they land and if they stay for a period of time, are tariffs really just transitory? Do we go back to the transitory discussion that the Fed had about inflation back then? Is it just a transitory period of time, or is this a structural issue? Well, tariffs to me are just a tax. It's a tax on another country to bring their goods in, right?
And you change them, and so
they charge us tariffs when we send stuff out,
and that's what the battle is. They're just saying, "Well, we're going to tariff you," and we're
having a trade war.
Yeah, exactly. But that's transitory.
Yeah, it's
like this isn't a structural thing, in my opinion.
He's trying to just balance the scales so that it's fair.
It's whatever part of his overall thing is like, hey, our biggest tool. This is what we talk about. We have two huge tools: the military and our economy. And we don't want to use the military, so we have to use our economy. And the only way to use our economy in a geopolitical world is through tariffs. And so we're trying to get border control through tariffs. And then you have the argument, well, how do you act? Right? So it just. That's what the purpose is, which makes them transitory. And so I think Doge is way more important to the overall conversation than tariffs. I think tariffs are like a first 6 to 12 months of his term discussion, and then after that, it's gone.
I don't know. He says he wants to be referred to in history as Tariff Man. I don't know if that's a 6-month play there.
No, that's the other thing. I think he's a better manipulator of media and frame than he is a negotiator. And I think he just knows how to push the buttons to, tariffs are pretty hot right now. That's really good. I'll just push this tariff button. And then it's going to be something else 6 months from now. Once they're done, once they're transitory, once he got as close to what he thought he could get. Because we also know as he's saying, this is what I want, he also has a retreat line. He just doesn't want to go back. He wants to stay far away from that retreat line as possible.
He always does an either or. So it's like he did this with the federal employees. You can either resign and I'll pay you 8 months of pay to quit.
Yeah.
Or you can come back and work in the office 5 days a week. It's like this. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. He did the same. He's doing the same thing with tariffs. He's saying you can either pay a 50% or 25% tariff, or you could build a factory in America, and you can build your cars or whatever it is you're building here, and we'll give you very, very low tax treatment so that you can make a lot of money here.
Yeah.
And then already he's only been the president for a month.
Yeah, but
and you already have car companies going, I think we're going to get out of Mexico and build a plant in America.
So are you saying there's a carrot with all these sticks?
Yeah.
No. No. There's a carrot?
It's like,
no.
I'm going to give you one or the other. Which one do you want? You want the carrot or the stick?
I don't know. I haven't read one headline about a carrot.
Well, he said
I'm not saying they're not there. I'm just saying from a media standpoint.
Yeah. Mexico and Canada, it was like, you saw within 24 hours, if you put 10,000 troops at the border and appoint a fentanyl czar in both countries to make sure fentanyl isn't coming into our country and you're protecting our borders, then we won't do the tariffs. And within 24 hours, they both did it.
And you have movements, right? Okay, you move this chess piece. Well, how does that play out? Do you need to move it again? Well, if that wasn't enough, we're going to do it again. We're going to where you haven't fixed the problem. And so that's why I say it's like this is a period of time where this is the tool. Until he gets to the carrots that he believes are enough, he's going to keep whipping you. Like until he gets the outcomes he wants. And he's going to give you carrots to get those outcomes. He's going to whip you until you're taking the carrots.
You know what's interesting about this is I think that if he would have won second term, I don't think his second 4 years would have been like this 4 years is going to be. No. I think he's got a vendetta. I mean, they did everything they could to go after him.
I don't think he would have had as much Republican support in his second term as he did now.
It created a fire to go out and, I mean, just at the speed they're moving, the things that they're doing. I mean, it's quite impressive. If you're on the other side of this and you don't like it, it's probably not very impressive.
Well, and that's why everyone is just pointing to character and morals.
Okay, so you can be upset about the kind of guy he is, or
it's really hard to argue against the economic theory. The only way, I love Jay Scott, but he's a little bit more of a Trump hater, and so he's really hitting these inflation things. And part of this is a really good discussion. Part of it is, well, here's how tariffs work. So if Trump's elected in November and you're a lumber supplier, you're not waiting for the tariffs to hit before you start increasing your cost of lumber. And so immediately
preemptive.
Exactly. So when our inflationary reports come out hot in January, he's saying that is a reflection of decisions being made post-election, which is truthful. But what we need to understand is there's another side of that coin. And the other side of that coin is builder sentiment is significantly low. And you may say, these tariffs are coming, and I'm increasing my prices. And the market may say, too bad. I'm just not paying it.
You posted about this yesterday. You were talking about how builders just build. The reason why sentiment goes lower is because there's some event that happens. It's harder to borrow money. It's harder to negotiate land. It's harder to make a deal pencil. Like, they want to build all the time as much as they can possibly build. What drives the sentiment down isn't like, I saw a headline and I'm going to shut my business down for 6 months. It's more like, in the real world, they're having a harder time, just like us, transacting, because borrowing is harder and offers are harder and price discovery is harder.
And the other part is, once they've pushed it down, once they've made the decision based on that capital stack, it's really hard to not finish it.
Yeah.
Like our example of all the condos we built, a really good example. It's like we're just chasing lower and lower and lower and lower and lower in profit. Well, what's the alternative? Won't ever be able to borrow debt from construction lenders again because we defaulted on projects. Won't ever be able to borrow that private debt ever again because we didn't get our private lenders, right? And so you're down this road and you just have to work your way through it, because that is the deleveraging standpoint to get you to a better spot.
Yeah, because you're not dabbling like, let's go build a building every once in a while. It's your business.
Yes.
And you have to ebb and flow with the changes.
So when you're in South Salem and you buy land 3-4 years ago and you wanted to sell those 5-bedroom houses for $550,000 and the market says you can only sell them for $450,000, guess what? You sell them for $450,000 so you can get out of the project.
Yeah.
And it's not, well, then, but what does that also do? You don't go buy more land.
Well, you don't have the money to.
You don't pull permits. Exactly.
You don't have the cash.
And if you did have the cash, you're not doing it. Or you're doing it at a lower price that the landowner may not accept.
Because now the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Exactly. And so now you don't have the demand for the building materials. So even though the suppliers may be trying to put tariff pressure on you,
so
they may not be able to.
This is a really strange topic because I just read this morning that our home prices hit an all-time high. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I mean
they have. Yes.
Is it? I mean, it went up another 3.4% or whatever in January. So if houses are at an all-time high, shouldn't builder sentiment be high? But it's like the cost of building has gone up faster than the value of houses have gone. So even when houses are at an all-time high, interest rates are still just got a chokehold on the market to where the affordability is not there. Like you may have a profit margin in there between what you build for and what the house will one day
Builder
sell for.
Builder sentiment isn't based on values. Builder sentiment is based on transaction volume. Yes.
Because the value is the highest, but the transaction volume is shit.
Right.
And so it's like, the people who are selling are still getting top dollar, but there are a lot less people who are actually selling.
And it's the values are based on margin though?
Well, you would aim for margin, but then what happens is you got to start lowering your price or sit on the house.
And what
but I'm saying builder sentiment would be based, like if you're building houses and you can do whatever you want and have a huge margin, you're probably pretty stoked to build houses. But what you're saying, where it's like when materials are going up and the land is too expensive and then you have to sell the house, even if
in
you're
a vacuum,
selling,
that makes sense. But when you're a production builder, whether you're making 75 a house versus 50 a house doesn't matter. You need to get your 100 houses out the door.
Yep.
And so that's what drives it. It's not profitability, it's volume.
Yeah.
Aren't prices at an all-time high almost all the time?
Here's the problem with prices.
They're not in commercial. If what had happened in commercial happened in residential the last 3 years, there would be nobody building
because
a
commercial
house.
is real. Housing is not. And the all-time housing price is propped up by existing homes. Mm-hmm. Builders do not feel what existing homeowners feel right now. Builders feel a difference.
But they're selling more new homes than they ever have. They're at a record high, aren't they?
They're not.
That's what the news is saying.
No, they're not.
Okay.
No.
You disagree.
Yeah. At least in our market, what I'm seeing. I'm sure there's markets. Like we're locational now.
What do you mean when you say commercial is real and residential is not?
Residential has a shelter cost component to it. 25% of the cost of residential real estate is baked into just our lives. That's not the case for commercial.
Yeah, it's not.
So commercial is a business.
Yes.
And residential is
the commercial
emotional.
reflects the economy.
Residential is a utility.
Residential reflects a cave.
It's like the car business.
Yeah.
It's like it always comes back to the car business.
It is. All retail is like residential real estate is like retail. I think that's
just
how
emotional.
I look at it.
Yeah.
It's about. Yeah. You've got a.
How much can I afford right now?
Yeah.
How fast can I get it? Does it meet my needs?
I'm trying to get a pre-approval. They wrote me a letter. I can go buy this, and that's what I'm going to go buy. You buy the best house you can buy.
I think I'm going to have this for 10. I might have it for 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we answered any questions. I may be more confused.
I think we just gave up.
What I'm curious to know is, I guess where all this goes. It's the same thing everybody wants to know: is what's happening. There's a lot happening. Is it good? Is it bad? Are there things that we're not seeing that we need to be seeing? And in my opinion, if we do what's good for the country, we balance the budget, we put money in people's pockets, we stop wasteful spending. If we could stop taxes, that would be amazing. Have external, revenue service. All of these things are amazing ideas. How that truly affects us, I would imagine. My response to Paul yesterday was, if you make Main Street America better, our businesses will flourish because people need houses. It doesn't mean now if borrowing costs go way down and suddenly they make it super easy to go build buildings, we may have a problem because now we got a lot more competition for that dollar that's chasing our buildings, right? Mm-hmm. But as long as you keep that supply and demand, as long as they put more money into the pockets of people that need housing than they do into the people that are building housing, then to me, the housing shortage probably, I don't know if it gets solved, but I think that for us as building owners, we'll have our clients, our customers, our tenants will be doing better, and they'll have more money, and they will compete for more commercial building space, residential space, buying houses.
I always talk about the other side of the sheet, right? You've got one person's spending is another person's income. The thing about money in the economy is there's no side to it. It doesn't matter what side it's coming into the economy from, whether it's the Fed or it's the government. As long as money's getting put into the economy, we feel better. But right now, we're trying to suck it out and put it in, and we're not feeling good about that.
Yeah, because the true effect is everything feels really hard still. It's still really hard to borrow money. It's still really hard to transact. Like, we're not out of the woods yet. So
but you have to get it under control before you can put it back in a sustainable manner.
Okay, so how long does that take?
At least 2-3 years.
Oh.
It's not one. Definitely not one.
So you're saying the 2.5-3 years pain.
We'll probably add, I mean, throw this out there, probably add $2 trillion of debt this year, probably add another $1 trillion of debt next year. Maybe in year 3 we have a balanced budget.
So when do interest rates start to go down?
That's so tough because that's such an allocation conversation, and you don't. Well, how quick is the unemployment rate going to increase? I think that conversation is exacerbated. The Fed only employs like 1% of our jobs. It's not insignificant, but
you're talking about the federal government.
The federal government,
not the Fed.
There's only
Federal Reserve.
Federal employees are 1% of all the jobs in our nation. Federal spending, which goes to state jobs, is different. That's a whole nother level of workers. So we just don't know.
Yeah, I don't think the firings that we got rid of 6,000 IRS agents and we got rid of whatever. Like, I don't think those numbers are going to.
I'd say this: as a business owner, AI, if you don't do your tax returns well and you're concerned about audits, I'd be afraid of AI and firing 6,000 IRS agents. Because you get rid of 6,000 IRS agents, you got to replace them with a computer, and that computer is going to do a much better job of fighting your fraudulent activity inside your tax return.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I saw today that Washington, D.C.
That's not me, by the way. I'm not concerned about AI.
the housing inventory in Washington, D.C. hit a 10-year high today. So people are selling their houses.
So my friend Pat Hyman, who founder of GoBundance, he just put his childhood home on the market in Maryland, and his anecdotal evidence was 5 offers in a week, 25 open houses, 56 showings, yada yada yada, 10 days pending over asking. His anecdotal evidence was completely opposite. And here's the thing: it's the same fucking image that everyone is sharing that shows coming soon, like listed, coming soon, all these. Is it a real image? Where is that image sourced from?
Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah, this is all just media stuff.
Dead internet bullshit is what it is.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll get more truthful media out of this. Yeah. We'll see.
Because think about it. Do those people that they all fired, do they all own a home?
No.
Are they all immediately like, we're leaving Washington, D.C.?
Actually, most of the people they fired were just they were probationary employees anyway. So they had only been there the last 6 months. So I'd be
more concerned about their midterm rental market, right? Like, there's different things you should be concerned about than the housing values, people's listing their houses. Senators didn't get fired. House reps didn't get fired. You still have a whole new administration moving into the White House. Like, it's the thought of just mass people leaving because of no. I don't agree with that at all.
All right.
Yeah.
There you have it. Trevor, you didn't say anything. What's wrong with you?
I was just listening today. I learned a lot.
Edumacated. So technically that was episode 98.
Oh, are we coming up on 100?
We're coming up on 100.
Oh, we got to do something special.
So we should do a quick 99 today, and then next week
do a special one.
We have to do something special.
All right.
I like that.
Trevor will do a little
Trevor will
dance.
think through that.
All right, so let's come back and we can talk about the 2025 Portland Economic Report.
All right, sounds good. Hey, guys, you're the Deal Junkies. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please share us. We're going to be getting ready. We're coming up on 100 episodes. So thanks for being our fans, and thanks for helping us grow. We're having a lot of fun doing this, and we will see you next time.